It is going to be a party line vote. I know that as soon as I walked up here, that I have not converted one of my friends in the minority party to come across and vote with. But be honest about what the bill does when you go home. It strikes a sunset and allows you to get any vaccination you want to get based off the information you're deciding for you and your family for your conversations with your doctor.
A contentious debate in the Senate over repealing the mandate requiring proof of vaccinations for government services. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers on this day 14 of the Georgia legislative session. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. We'll have more on the news of the day in just a moment. Also on the show, we'll learn more about legislation to charge someone with criminal negligence if they fail to secure a loaded firearm or leave a gun in a place where a child could access it. Two Democratic lawmakers join us to talk about that bill and an abortion bill. And last session, the Georgia Senate passed a bill to keep social media sites from censoring content, but the bill went nowhere in the House. Tonight, we'll talk with House Republicans who want to see it move forward this year. But first, let's get right down to the Gold Dome for a wrap-up of today's news there from our Capitol correspondent, Rochelle Ritchie. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, Donna. Well, the biggest news of the day coming from the Senate as penalties for human trafficking have now been increased and proof of a COVID-19 vaccine will no longer be required come July. In the Senate today, the topic of COVID once again became a political maelstrom. Senate Bill 1 would remove a sunset clause scheduled to end this June and permanently prohibit state and local authorities from requiring proof of a COVID vaccine to receive government services.
Last year, then Chairman Mullis carried a bill that prevented government from withholding services from citizens based on their vaccination status for COVID-19. That bill had a sunset in it that is set to sunset June 30th of 2023. The only thing that this bill does is strikes the sunset.
It seems to me, wouldn't you agree, that by having this bill, we actually are locking ourselves into a rigid position and not allowing governments and agencies to actually change with science and circumstances. Wouldn't you agree?
I do not agree, Senator. You have the ability, just as any other legislator does in this chamber, to come forward should the circumstances change and pass a bill that would require government or allow government to discriminate against its citizens and deny services based on a vaccination status. I believe that that would be a dramatic position to take, and we certainly would want to do that if we were to ever do that with a virus that has a fatality rate of greater than 0.1%, which is what COVID currently has.
But the debate quickly devolved into the politics of pro and anti-vaccinators.
An anti-vax movement cropped up, and that's where you're seeing this bill come from. That's where you're seeing this bill come from. And first it was, first it was a let's just do it, make it sunset. Don't worry, this isn't going to be forever. Let's just make it sunset. Well, that got the camel's nose under the tent of the anti-vaxxers, okay? You know that, we all know that old saying, the camel got the nose under the tent, and the next thing you know, the whole tent's being torn down.
It is going to be a party line vote. I know that as soon as I walked up here, that I have not converted one of my friends in the minority party to come across and vote with. But be honest about what the bill does when you go home. It strikes a sunset and allows you to get any vaccination you want to get based off the information you're deciding for you and your family for your conversations with your doctor.
In the end, the bill, as predicted, passed along political lines 31-21. Also, Senate Bill 36 passed 33-16 and will allow for penalty increases for pimping and pandering.
Vote for those being exploited, vote for those being sex trafficked, and please vote for this legislation.
This is about as simple gets, folks. You vote no on this bill, you're saying, I support the criminals. I think we should go easy on the people that are going to resell human beings.
The bill was met with opposition relating to whether it truly would be effective in discouraging criminals from committing sex trafficking and the repercussions of being convicted of a felony.
What happens when you get a felony? So when you get a felony, you're obviously going to lose the right to vote, lose the right to be able to run for office. Very difficult problems with housing. You're also going to, if you're a student, or you're going to possibly lose student loan opportunities.
The senator from the 29th, in introducing his bill, I had a simple question. How big is this problem? And I don't think that if someone is going to introduce legislation in this chamber, moving from misdemeanors to felonies, that's too difficult of a question to ask.
The bill's sponsor, Senator Randy Robertson, with a stern response to the question of whether the bill would make an impact.
And anyone who steps into this well and pretends that they don't know the devastation that sex trafficking has on the city of Atlanta and the entire state of Georgia, if they stand in here and honestly tell you they do not know, then I would have to say that this is one of the most disconnected individuals in this entire building.
Senate Bill 36 will now change the first human trafficking offense from a misdemeanor to a felony, punishable with a prison term of no less than 1 year and no more than 10.
Mandatory minimums have failed in this state and all over this country for that particular reason, because it takes away the judicial discretion.
And Atlanta Braves outfielder and 2022 National League Rookie of the Year, Michael Harris, visited the Senate and House to receive a special resolution acknowledging his recent success and continued community outreach.
It means a lot to be here. I didn't know going through school I would be in a building like this talking in front of you guys. Yeah, but on behalf of myself and my foundation, Catch 23 Foundation, I just want to appreciate everybody in here and the legislative body. It means a lot, like I said, and it's kind of surreal. It won't really hit me until I get back home.
And Donna, also today, Girl Scouts flooded the Gold Dome for Girl Scout Day at the Capitol. The Girl Scouts organization began in 1912 right in Savannah, Georgia. And Donna, I understand you have been supporting them since you were a little girl yourself.
That's right. I was a Girl Scout, I was a Girl Scout mom, and I've been a Girl Scout leader for about 15 years. What about you?
Well, from this former Brownie, that is my Capitol report.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Rochelle. We're going to talk now about bills dealing with gun safety and abortion with two Democratic lawmakers. Senator Elena Parent represents Atlanta and is the Democratic caucus chair in the Senate, and Representative Shay Roberts, who also represents Sandy Springs. Welcome to Lawmakers to both of you.
Thank you.
So let's get started. Right now, Democrats have a legislative package of, I understand, 5 gun bills. And we're going to learn more in a press conference that'll be coming up later, the first part of next week.
Monday.
But let's break things down a little bit. I understand you first introduced a version of SB 75 a few years ago. Tell us the background on why you introduced that. It deals with children and guns.
It does, Donna, and thank you so much for having me on this evening. Firearms are the #1 cause of death among children and have been now for a number of years running. And it's unfortunate, but we have far too many accidents as well as suicides when guns are left loaded and unsecured or not properly secured, and children can get their hands on them. A lot of adults think that children don't know where the guns are stored. And all the research shows children self-report that they indeed know where the guns are stored, and it has tragic consequences.
There was an incident, I understand, where you've heard of someone where the parent went inside and forgot to and left the gun out in the car. Right?
Well, you're right. That is what prompted me to originally write the bill, and I based it on Texas law. What happened in that incident? It was in north of Atlanta, kind of an ex-urban county, and a mom had her 2 children in the car, and she forgot something inside, ran back inside for just a couple minutes, and in that time, the 4-year-old child went into the compartment that's between the 2 seats, pulled out the loaded weapon, and killed the sibling.
Yeah. So tell me what your bill would do.
So if an individual left a readily dischargeable firearm where they knew or should have known that a child could get their hands on it, then it would be a misdemeanor. And if the child did harm themselves or someone else with that firearm, that would be a misdemeanor of a high or aggravated nature.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of more of the bills. And 44 and 45, they basically follow the federal Brady Handgun Violence Act. So it would require background checks and waiting periods. Talk about that a little bit more.
Well, I mean, I think it's 86% of Americans, it's high, over 80%, are in favor of background checks, universal background checks. And so we bring this bill every session in some version, and I just don't understand how we continue to be in a representative society where the majority of Americans want these common sense gun safety regulations, and it's not, no one's trying to take away anyone's guns, but we just need to put some of these things in place to protect our children and to protect our citizens.
So the argument against it is that it's infringing on Second Amendment rights. How do you respond?
You still have the right to have a gun, but we can still make sure that the rest of the public stays safe. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, you feel the same way on that, too.
I do. I mean, no right is absolute. You know, when there's a danger to other people, that's when those rights are not absolute to the individual claiming that right. And we see that with every portion of the Bill of Rights, as a matter of fact. So certainly that's not picking on the Second Amendment. And, as Representative Roberts said, no, it's not about taking away guns. What we have is a public health crisis as it relates to children, as it relates to gun violence in general, as it relates to guns and crime. Let's be clear that the crime that everyone is concerned about largely deals with gun crime, and to the extent it's car break-ins, it's people looking for guns that people leave in glove boxes. It is a huge factor as it relates to the crime spike that we've had. There has been a claim over the years that more guns would make folks safer. That was a claim in 2014 when the first large rollback of some of Georgia's gun restrictions occurred. And our crime rates and violent crime rates have actually just gone up since that time.
But you'll admit that this is probably an uphill battle with this leadership. How are you feeling about it?
I mean, I think we feel stronger about the kid bill, because...
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think it's hard to look at something that's not saying you can't have a gun, but we need to protect children when it's the #1 killer of children. That's a little harder to look somebody in the face and say that doesn't make sense.
Right,
So,
and the pediatricians, now that firearms have been the #1 cause of death among children for a number of years running, are beginning to delve into this issue at a higher level. And so we are hopeful that as knowledge spreads about that, we need to just look at it with a public health eye as it relates to this piece. And it isn't about saying folks can't have firearms in the home. One fact that many people don't know is that you are not cleared to be a foster parent in Georgia unless you have secured guns safely, stored them away from any children, ammunition away from the gun, and you are not allowed to carry around the child that you would be taking care of for the state of Georgia.
Okay, well, we're going to switch gears a little bit because I want to have talk a little bit about HB 75, your bill, and another uphill fight for you possibly, and this deals with abortion. Tell us what it's all about.
So the Reproductive Freedom Act is essentially a vision for what we want to see here in Georgia. It's not just a repeal of HB 481. Even prior to Roe being overturned by the Dobbs decision, we didn't have equal access to abortion care. And so we want to make sure that the communities that couldn't afford access, that insurance companies not be precluded from state issued insurance plans should be able to cover the access. We want to make sure that there aren't mandatory waiting periods and biased counseling. This is a health care situation, just like we're talking about guns. These are health issues. Abortion care is healthcare, and we are watching the number. I mean, we already had one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the country. And we are getting reports, statistics are being taken now, studies are being done as to how this bill, HB 481, is impacting those numbers even more significantly. And so we need to put these decisions back into the hands of doctors. We should not have our doctors having to wait till their patients are just close enough to death to decide to administer care. It's dangerous. I was just reading, I think President Biden has some guests that are going to sit in the box for his State of the Union, and it's a couple that in Texas, that ban, she had an ectopic pregnancy and they had to wait for her to get to a certain point, and she ended up with sepsis and almost died. I mean, these are the stories that people are not talking about. But bottom line is, we also think that every Georgian should have the freedom, an abundance of freedom, to decide if and when and with whom they want to start a family. And so this is our vision of what we want for Georgia.
You were here in 2019 when the Life Act passed, 481, HB 481. So what do you expect this time around with what you're offering here?
I imagine that there's going to be some interest on behalf of the leadership of the majority party to wait until the court decisions come down. We have a decision out of Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney striking down 481. And that will be heard before the Georgia Supreme Court within the next few months, and we'll get a decision this summer. And then after that, I think discussions will need to resume. 481 was passed before Roe was overturned by the slimmest of margins in the House of Representatives. And the reaction from Georgians as well as the general voting public has been decidedly negative to the overturning of a right that women have had for 50 years until now. And so one might imagine that it might be more difficult to pass that bill now with the reality of the fallout now being present.
Well, we'll keep an eye on all of this. I want to thank you both for being here, and we'll keep people up to date. Okay.
Thank you, Donna.
Now, coming up, 2 Republican lawmakers join us to discuss their bills. One that would change how people convicted of dangerous sexual offenses are sentenced, and another would prohibit social media companies from censoring the content of its users.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
Kirsten had a lot of courage. She fought for Black culture.
They could have killed you. You're exactly what we need right now.
Oh my God.
What is this?
She was poisoned.
These and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front lines
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
One of the easiest ways to support GPB is to become a monthly GPB sustainer. Your monthly support continues automatically month after month and supports not only the great programming that you love on GPB, but also our efforts in the community. GPB is committed to provide a trusted space for lifelong learning on the air, digitally and in person all across Georgia. All this is made possible with your monthly support. And we can't do it without you, so please donate right now at gpb.org/give. And thanks.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. Let's bring in our panel now, because joining me to talk about several issues are two Republican lawmakers, Representative Trey Kelly of Cedartown in the northwest part of the state, and Representative Stephen Saines of St. Mary's in the southeast part of Georgia. Welcome to Lawmakers. So last session, the Georgia Senate passed a bill to keep social media platform sites from censoring content. It made it out of the Senate. It didn't go anywhere after that. So Representative Saines, tell us a little bit about that bill and what you would like to see and what your bill is about.
Sure, and thank you for allowing us to be here. I'm proud to bring this bill with my colleague, Representative Trey Kelly. And what we're doing here is ensuring that no citizen in my district and Representative Kelly's district is infringed and muzzled by social media companies, their ability to express their speech. We've seen the Texas law being upheld by the Circuit Court, and it really shows that social media companies, Facebook and Twitter and Google platforms, are integral to our constituents' daily lives, and that integration requires the necessity for us to regulate their ability to not be infringed when they communicate in those platforms.
The Texas law, can you tell us about that a little bit?
Sure. It's House Bill 20 in Texas, and the 5th U.S. Circuit of Appeals upheld it and basically said that social media companies do not have the right to stunt and mute voices on their platform that don't violate unprotected speech already. So anything that incites violence, anything that is otherwise illegal and unpermissible in other areas is still able to be moderated. But other than that, it is the public square. And I'm proud to have colleagues like Representative Trey Kelly. I'm not an attorney, but it's good to have folks who can look through it, because this is a challenging bill. There's a mixed court opinion, so having attorney colleagues in the legislature helps looking at the technicality, and we think the Texas bill is a great starting point.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Donna, first, thank you for having us here. It's great to be here with my colleague, Chairman Saines. And when he brought this piece of legislation to me, I was honored to co-sponsor it with him. I think we can all agree that as a society that we are better when we foster environments for healthy debate. And that's not only at the State House, it's in our city squares, and those city squares have now turned into our social media platforms. And we need to help foster environments where everyone's opinion can be heard. And social media has taken such a prevalent role in our society today that those are your city squares. And we need to foster an environment where individuals can have robust debate. We can encourage conversations. We can listen to all the different voices and opinions and try to figure out how we can better ourselves as a society.
So you do want some monitoring, as Representative Saines said, but just not everything. You feel that they've gone too far? Can you give an example?
I think we've seen it on both sides of the political aisle. We've seen complaints from both of the largest parties in our democratic process here. We've heard complaints from the left and the right. That may be the one thing we can agree about, is that we have seen censorship of social media on social media. And we need to be working together to ensure that just because someone's viewpoint is different than mine or yours or maybe the creator of the platform, that it's not silenced. And so what the bill simply does is it says, look, we're going to have a process that everyone understands, including the users. We're going to have that posted. It gives an opportunity, should a speech be censored, for the user to then appeal that process. It puts some time constraints on the social media platforms to do that. And this is an important conversation that we need to be having as a society. These social media platforms get some direct benefits and protections, both at the state level and the federal level. And as a result of that, I think they've subjected themselves to some oversight, reasonable oversight, that helps foster debate.
Okay, so we'll see how that goes this year in the House, because we know the Senate did it. So I want to talk about something else. This is the 4th time, I understand, you've introduced the Georgia Dangerous Sexual Predator Prevention Act. Tell us about it.
Thank you. And a little role reversal in terms of bills getting stunted. The House has led on this issue. This is something I took on as a freshman legislator. A colleague came to me and noted that Park v. State created a vulnerability for the families in this state in terms of the court deciding that we could not GPS monitor dangerous sexual predators. That's about 7% of the overall sex offender registry. So you're talking about the most heinous of individuals who are the most likely to reoffend. And we took the ability in that decision for sheriffs to utilize that sex offender registry in terms of, and look at the leveling of a dangerous sexual predator, which is the most heinous leveling, and say we're going to GPS monitor these individuals because that's shown to be a very effective way of deterring additional victims. So what this does, this bill creates a new pathway, a legal pathway after this decision to ensure that GPS monitoring can still be a tool we use to prevent new victims in this state. It's a bill we've reintroduced several times. It's passed every year in the House. And frankly, the Georgia Defense Attorneys Association, they have an angle in terms of we all want a good defense attorney, but when you prioritize the needs of the most heinous of individuals over the families and children in our state is when we're going to take a stance and make sure that we protect those families. And we do think that, again, 7% of the overall sex offenders in the state would be penalized for this crime because we were very strategic on who we wanted to target in terms of having that lifetime sentence to allow for probation, to allow for a GPS monitor.
So we're talking about those ankle monitors with GPS monitors on them, yeah. So do you feel better about it this year, getting through the House again and then on to the Senate?
I do. I don't think, there's a lot of, we fortunately for I think most folks, we are not in session for a long time. We have to pick and choose our priorities. So when it's gone over to the Senate, there's been limited time. We have several advocates over there. We did get it to the floor last session, and it ran out of time the last day of the year. So we're hoping that it will be a little quicker to go through both processes and get to the governor's desk because it's a crucial piece of legislation.
Okay, we'll keep up with that. We don't have a lot of time, but I know that you are in favor. There's a bill that deals with cracking down on fentanyl. What can you tell us about that?
Donna, and I will be brief. We do have a public health crisis in our country, and it's spurred by crime. One thing we've seen, proud to support Rep. Saines on the legislation he's spoken about, but we have a crisis that's been created by lack of effort at the federal level. President Biden and his administration failing to secure our border is allowing tons of fentanyl to cross our borders and infiltrate our communities. I don't think there's been a family across our state or a community across our state that hasn't been impacted by the fentanyl crisis. And you're going to see several pieces of legislation this year. There's one from Representative Mathis, Representative McCollum. I'm proud to have signed on to House Bill 253 with Representative Montahan. That is an effort we worked with our district attorney in Paulding County, Matt Rollins, on. That's going to make it increase penalties for those who distribute or manufacture drugs that are laced with fentanyl. Just the tiniest amounts of fentanyl can kill individuals, and so we're going to make it a crime of murder for those individuals who manufacture or distribute those drugs that ultimately cause someone's death. There's a second component to the bill that's extremely important as well. It would create increased penalties and offenses for those who are trying to sell and traffic drugs around our drug treatment centers. We know those individuals in those treatment centers are in a very vulnerable state when they're in and out, and we need to make sure that when we're catching those drug traffickers, that we are placing some very serious penalties on them.
All right then. Well, we'll pay attention to that and your bills too. I want to thank you both for being here today, and we'll keep up to date with what you're doing down there. Thank you for coming on. That does it for Lawmakers today. We'll be back tomorrow for Legislative Day 15. And for more on the world of politics, tune in to Political Rewind with Bill Nigut at 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. each weekday. Good night.